Eleanor Caldwell stood in black lace beside her husband's casket, her eyes dry, her smile faint. And 2 hours later, Adam Caldwell, her brother-in-law, discovered the secret she thought had been buried with the body. The rain came down in shut-in awe, a slow, steady drizzle, soaking the black umbrellas and dark coats that filled the small cemetery. Martin Caldwell's funeral was not grand, but it was dignified. The people who gathered, family, old college friends, a few colleagues, stood silently as the minister spoke of Martin's life. A brilliant architect, a loving husband, a generous brother. Everyone nodded. No one cried loudly. It was the kind of grief that sat quietly, pressing into the lungs, not wanting to be seen. And at the very front, standing still as stone, was Eleanor Caldwell, Martin's wife of 10 years. She wore a long black dress and a matching coat that hugged her frame. A small black veil covered her eyes, but it couldn't hide the way she kept her face perfectly composed. There were no red eyes, no trembling lips. She accepted condolences with short nods and whispered thanks, her voice steady. Her behavior to some was admirable, to others it was unnerving. People grieve in different ways, they reminded themselves. Still, a few guests exchanged glances. 2 rows back stood Adam Caldwell, Martin's younger brother. He had arrived the night before, flying in from Chicago. He hadn't seen Martin in over a year, but they used to be close. Growing up, they'd shared a room, swapped secrets, played pranks. Life, of course, pulled them apart over time. Careers, distance, distractions. When Adam heard the news of Martin's car crash, he was shocked. Martin was a careful driver, always alert, never reckless. The report said he veered off a rural road late at night, hitting a tree. The car burst into flames. No one else was in the vehicle. The cause of the crash was ruled accidental. Adam had questions, but no one seemed to have answers. He barely had a chance to speak with Eleanor when he arrived. She had been busy arranging everything. Flowers, guests, catering. Efficient, controlled. At the reception following the burial, guests were ushered into the Caldwells' elegant 2-story home just outside of town. It was the same house Adam had visited years ago when Martin first bought it. Everything looked the same, immaculate, cold, designed like a magazine spread. But there was something else now, something Adam couldn't quite name. It wasn't grief, it was absence. The kind of emptiness that doesn't come from death, but from pretending it never happened. People moved quietly through the rooms, sipping wine and picking at hors d'oeuvres laid out on long trays. Eleanor moved among them gracefully, thanking. Everyone smiling politely, making small talk. No signs of exhaustion, no signs of stress. Just poise. Adam stood near the fireplace, studying the framed photos along the mantel. Pictures of Martin and Eleanor on vacation, at dinner parties, on hikes. Each one more carefully posed than the last. Not a hair out of place. He found one photo of the brothers together at a beach, clearly older. Martin had his arm around Adam's shoulder. They looked like different people back then. Relaxed, sunburned, genuinely happy. As the guests began to drift out, Adam felt a growing tightness in his chest. He had told himself he came to say goodbye to Martin, but now he wasn't. Sure. He felt like he had walked into a stage play, where everyone had a role and followed a script too perfectly. Even Eleanor's tears, when they came, just once during the burial, had felt timed, practiced. An hour passed, then another. Adam remained behind after most of the guests had gone. He made polite excuses, said he wanted to check on Eleanor. Before returning to his hotel, she nodded, offered him a weak smile, and disappeared upstairs, Moments later, he heard a door close. Alone in the quiet house, Adam's curiosity overwhelmed his grief. He didn't believe in ghosts or gut feelings, but something pushed him toward the stairs. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit and lined with closed doors. He passed the guest room, a small study, and then paused outside the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. The bed was made, not a wrinkle in the sheets. The dresser gleamed. No piles of laundry, no clutter. A faint scent of lavender hung in the air, like a hotel room after housekeeping. Adam stepped inside, careful not to touch anything. He remembered how Martin used to leave his socks in weird places, how Eleanor would roll her eyes. That man hadn't lived in this room recently, not the Martin Adam knew. On the far side of the room, a bookshelf stood beside the window. A few books, some magazines, and framed photos sat on the shelves. Below it, a wide drawer blended into the frame. Adam knelt and pulled it open. It stuck slightly, but gave way with a quiet creak. Inside were a few of Martin's old sketchbooks, a leather folder, and a sealed envelope thick with papers. He opened the folder first. Architectural, drawings, then a few receipts, nothing unusual. He picked up the envelope and turned it over. No markings. Inside were documents, insurance policies, bank statements, and a printed will. His eyes caught on one detail immediately. The life insurance policy, issued 3 weeks ago. A massive payout, and only one name listed as the beneficiary, Eleanor Caldwell. Adam blinked. He flipped to the next page. A payment confirmation, wire transfer to a private investigator. The amount was significant. Attached was a business card, partially ripped, with a phone number scrawled in pen. Below it, a yellowed sticky note with a single word in Martin's handwriting, betrayal. The air left Adam's lungs. Betrayal. That was not a word Martin used lightly. Adam suddenly felt the weight of the envelope in his hands, as if it carried more than paper. It carried a warning, a suspicion, or maybe even a final attempt to speak from beyond the grave. He tucked the envelope inside his coat and gently closed the drawer. As he stood to leave, his eyes caught the reflection in the mirror. Himself, pale and confused, standing in a house filled with secrets. 2 hours after his brother's funeral, Adam Caldwell had discovered something he was never meant to find. He didn't yet know what it meant, but he knew one thing for certain. This story wasn't over, not even close. Back at his motel, Adam couldn't sit still. The envelope pressed against his chest like a weight, a physical reminder of the unease that had been growing in him since the moment he saw Eleanor at the funeral. He placed it on the desk by the window, the sound of rain still tapping against the glass behind him. The motel room was dim, its floral wallpaper faded and peeling. In corners, the yellowed lamps casting uneven light across the bed. But none of it mattered. All Adam could focus on was the contents of that envelope and the puzzle they hinted at. He laid everything out slowly. First, the life insurance policy, dated exactly 21 days before Martin's death. The policy had been processed quickly, almost unusually so. The payout was enormous, $2.5 million. The beneficiary, Eleanor, stood to receive it all. There was no mention of a secondary beneficiary, no charitable donation, no mention of Adam, just Eleanor. That wasn't like Martin. He was deliberate, cautious, and deeply private when it came to money. Adam remembered a conversation they'd had 2 years ago when Martin had mentioned wanting to set up a trust, something to protect his assets. It was strange that Martin had changed his insurance so recently, and even stranger that he had apparently told no one. Adam moved on to the next document, the wire transfer receipt. It was made to a private investigator named Harold M. Carson. The transfer had been sent from Martin's personal account just 2 weeks before his death. The amount was not small, nearly $7,000, and the notation field read, "Final installment." Adam studied the receipt again. Martin had paid this man for something. Surveillance, information, a background check. It was impossible to know. He picked up the torn business card that had been tucked in with the other documents. The corner had been ripped off, removing part of the name and phone number, but enough remained to piece something together. The card read. The rest had been torn away. Adam reached for his phone, typed the partial number into a search engine, and added keywords like private investigator and Rosewood. A few listings popped up, but nothing matched exactly. He tried searching the name, but still no result for a Harold Carson in the area. It was like the man didn't exist. Frustrated, Adam leaned back in the motel chair and stared at the ceiling. The word betrayal, written in Martin's sharp, slanted handwriting, repeated in his mind. Why would Martin leave that word? Who had betrayed him? Was it Eleanor? The idea was hard to accept, but not impossible. Adam couldn't ignore how poised she'd seemed, how cleanly everything had been arranged. She hadn't cried at the funeral. She hadn't looked at Martin's casket once. Adam rubbed his temples. There had to be more. He returned to the envelope, shaking it gently. A small click as something slid to the bottom. He reached in and pulled out a black USB drive no larger than a paperclip. There were no labels on it, nothing to hint at what it contained. He hesitated, then crossed the room and plugged it into his laptop. It took a moment to load. Then a single folder appeared. Watch inside were dozens of image files and 3 short video clips. Adam opened the first photo. It was grainy and clearly taken from a distance, probably a telephoto lens. The image showed Eleanor sitting at an outdoor cafe across from a man Adam didn't recognize. Her hand was on the man's wrist, her body leaning in toward him. The next photo showed them leaving the cafe together, walking side by side, the man's hand on Eleanor's back. Adam clicked through image after image. The same man appeared repeatedly in different settings. A hotel lobby, a beach, a quiet park. The photos had been taken over the course of several months, each time showing Eleanor with this man, always close, always intimate. The timestamps confirmed it. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months, maybe longer. Then came the final photo. It was different, blurred, as if taken quickly and without preparation. The background was dark, the lighting poor. But Adam could still make out the faces. Eleanor and the man again, but this time the man was holding something. Car keys. Not just any keys, but Martin's. The distinctive leather keychain, a gift from Adam years ago, dangled clearly from the man's hand. A sick feeling settled in Adam's stomach. He clicked on the first video. It was only 10 seconds long. Shot. From inside a car, the footage showed Eleanor and the man exiting a building, laughing. The date stamp on the bottom corner, 3 days before Martin's death. The second video showed the two of them boarding a small private plane. No luggage, no goodbyes, just boarding and leaving. That one was marked with a date 1 day before the crash. Adam's hands were shaking by the time he opened the third video. This one was different. It showed a parked vehicle on a dirt road, Martin's car. The man from the photos approached it, looked around, then bent near the front of the vehicle for several minutes. The video was silent, and the image wasn't sharp, but Adam saw the man holding what looked like a wrench. He worked under the hood briefly, then stood up and walked away. The timestamp read, "The same night Martin died." Adam stared at the screen, his mind racing. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. Eleanor and the man had been planning something. Martin had suspected it, and he'd hired someone to follow them, to record everything. He had known. He just hadn't told anyone in time. But why keep all this hidden? Why not go to the police? Why not tell Adam? Adam sat back, the glow of the laptop screen flickering in his eyes. He didn't know what was more painful, the idea that his brother had died terrified and alone, or that he had tried to reach out and no one had been there to listen. He copied everything to a secure drive, packed the documents, and shut the laptop. It was no longer a question of suspicion. Something terrible had happened, and Adam couldn't let it stay buried. There were still too many questions. Who was the man in the photos? Was Martin's death truly an accident? And what exactly had Eleanor planned to do with $2.5 million and a disappearing act? Adam knew the next step wouldn't be easy. But one thing was certain. He wasn't leaving town until he found the answers. Morning came slowly, its gray light barely piercing through the motel curtains. Adam hadn't slept. The weight of what he'd uncovered sat like a stone on his chest. He had always trusted his instincts, and now they screamed louder than ever. Martin's death was no accident, and the woman who had stood at the funeral, with dry eyes and a calm face, was not the grieving widow she pretended to be. Adam had evidence, photos, video, financial documents, and a feeling that he was just beginning to scratch the surface of something much darker. He returned to the USB drive that morning and reviewed the files again. Each image, each timestamp, painted the same picture. Eleanor had been having an affair with a man Adam still couldn't identify. The man appeared confident, calculated. His face was sharp, with narrow eyes and a rigid jawline. A few of the clearer shots made Adam think the man might have been military or ex-law enforcement, someone used to structure, someone who knew how to blend in. In one photo, he wore a baseball cap and dark sunglasses, almost as if he expected to be watched. Whoever he was, he had been close enough to Martin's life to gain access to his car and possibly sabotage it. Adam needed a name. He took a still from one of the clearer videos and ran it through an online image search tool, hoping for a match. Hours passed. Most results were false leads, random lookalikes, stock images, unrelated people. Finally, one result caught his eye. A local newspaper article from 2 years earlier about a man named Daniel Rourke, arrested for illegal weapons possession and suspected in an arson case. The face matched. The article included one blurry image from a courtroom, but Adam was almost certain this was the same man from Eleanor's photos. According to the article, Rourke had been released on a technicality. No charges had stuck. Since then, he had disappeared from public records. Adam tried searching social media, employment databases, even obituaries. Nothing. Rourke had vanished. But it was clear now. This wasn't just some fleeting affair. Eleanor had gotten involved with someone dangerous. Adam printed the article and added it to the growing folder of evidence. He needed someone to take this seriously. But when he went to the local police station and asked to speak with a detective, things didn't go the way he hoped. He laid out the documents carefully in the small interview room. The officer, a tired man in his 50s, glanced through them but showed little reaction. He listened to Adam's explanation, the connections he'd made, the videos and the forged Documents. When Adam finished, the officer closed the folder slowly and leaned back. "There's no proof of foul play," the man said flatly. "You have photos of an affair, sure, but that doesn't make it murder. The crash was ruled accidental. You'd need hard forensic evidence to reopen that case." Adam stared at him in disbelief. "So if someone sabotaged the car and covered their tracks, you'd just let it go?" "We'd need more than suspicions and blurry photos," the officer replied. "Without physical proof, tampering on the car, a confession, something, we can't act." Adam left the station feeling helpless. The pieces were all there, but no one wanted to connect them. It was as if Martin had died, been buried, and now no one cared what had really happened. He sat in his car, staring at the folder on the passenger seat. He thought about going home, taking the evidence to a lawyer, maybe even a journalist. But then his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered, unsure why. The voice on the other end was distorted, like it had been altered through software. Robotic. Cold. "You're not the only one asking questions," the voice said. "If you want the truth, check Eleanor's storage unit. She rents one under the name Grace Harper, Unit 209. Don't trust the police." The line went dead. Adam sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear. Grace Harper. It was a name he hadn't seen before. Was Eleanor living a double life? Why would she use an alias? The call had come at just the right time, as if someone knew what he was doing and wanted to help, or maybe manipulate him. Still, he couldn't ignore it. He started the car and drove straight to the largest storage facility in the area, the kind with dozens of orange roll-up doors and cameras on every corner. Inside the office, a bored-looking attendant sat behind bulletproof glass. Adam put on his best polite voice and asked if he could inquire about a unit. He dropped Eleanor's fake name casually, like he had a right to know. "Grace Harper," the clerk said, typing without looking up. "Yeah, she rents 209. Long-term. Customer. No late payments? You want to rent the one next to hers?" Adam smiled and nodded. "Exactly that." He signed a rental form for Unit 210, received a key, and waited until the clerk stepped out for a smoke break. Then he walked down the row until he reached Eleanor's unit. The lock was simple, a standard padlock. He glanced around and, using a small crowbar from his trunk, popped it open quickly. Inside, the unit was surprisingly well organized. No dust, no cobwebs. Eleanor had been here recently. Boxes were neatly labeled, furniture covered with clean tarps. Adam moved cautiously, lifting lids, peering inside. Old photos, duplicate house keys, burners' phones, each one carefully stored. Stacks of receipts, many of them for cash purchases. But it was the filing cabinet in the back that truly drew his attention. Inside were dozens of folders. One contained copies of fake IDs, Eleanor's face under different names, including Grace Harper. Another held documents for foreign travel, including a printout of a booked flight to Belize under an alias. But one folder, marked Rourke, was thicker than the others. Inside, Adam found a contract. It was a single page. At the top, the names Eleanor Caldwell and Daniel Rourke. Below that, a typed agreement for transport and assistance, dated the same day Martin died. The phrasing was vague, but the intent was unmistakable. The document was signed by both parties, and beneath it, a handwritten note in Eleanor's script. "If anything goes wrong, disappear." Adam's hands shook as he held the papers. This wasn't just infidelity. This was conspiracy. Eleanor hadn't just moved on. She had planned for Martin to be removed. And now it was clear that the crash was staged. Martin had been killed, and everyone had believed the lie. He carefully packed the folder, returned everything else to its place, and relocked the unit. No alarms. No witnesses. Outside, the sky had darkened again. Rain threatened on the horizon. Adam looked up and exhaled. For the first time since Martin's funeral, he didn't feel like he was chasing shadows. He had evidence. He had names. He had a motive. Now all he needed was the truth to be heard, and this time, he wasn't going to be ignored. The silence in the motel room felt heavier than before, thick with the weight of what Adam had discovered. Papers and photos lay spread out across the bed, and the air smelled faintly of the rain that had begun again outside. The folder labeled Rourke now sat at the center of everything, its contents impossible to ignore. Adam didn't need guesses anymore. He had a motive, a named accomplice, and proof of intent. Martin hadn't just died. He'd been eliminated. Adam knew time wasn't on his side. If someone had tipped him off about the storage unit, that meant others were watching. Perhaps even Eleanor. She had slipped up once by keeping that folder, but Adam doubted she would make the same mistake again. She was clever. Too clever to leave loose ends. Which meant if she suspected he was getting too close, she might try to disappear entirely. He turned on his laptop and opened a private search engine. One of the receipts in the storage unit had been for a charter service, an unlisted company that operated out of a private airstrip 20 miles from Rosewood. The name was vague, just Emerald Sky, but the receipt had a date and time. 5 a.m., just 2 days away. It was under the name Grace Harper. She was planning to vanish. Adam scribbled the date in his notebook, then picked up the burner phones from the storage unit. He didn't dare turn them on, at least not yet, but he bagged them as evidence. One had a cracked screen. Another had a post-it note stuck inside the battery compartment. A number scrawled quickly, 803-1159. No area code, no name. He added that to his list of loose threads. He knew he needed help, but the police had already dismissed him. If he went back now, he risked losing everything, being labeled obsessed, unstable, or worse. So instead, he decided to go straight to someone who might listen. A local journalist named Serena Grant. Serena had covered several high-profile stories in Rosewood, especially the ones the police avoided. She had a reputation for following her instincts and taking risks. Adam remembered reading one of her pieces years ago, a cold case she helped reopen after uncovering mishandled evidence. If anyone would look at the material with a critical eye, it was her. He called the newspaper office, asked for her directly, and left a message. An hour later, she responded. Her voice was firm but curious. Adam explained only the basics, told her he had proof of an insurance scam, a suspicious death, and a plan to flee the country. She agreed to meet him that evening at a quiet diner, just outside town. The sun had set by the time Adam arrived. The diner was nearly empty, its neon sign flickering above the door. Serena was already there, a notebook in one hand and a black coffee in the other. She was younger than he expected, probably in her 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Adam sat across from her and laid out everything, starting from the funeral, the envelope from Martin, the photos, the surveillance, the storage unit, and finally the flight. Serena didn't speak until he finished. Then she leaned forward, tapping her pen against her notebook. If even half of what you're saying is true, she said, this isn't just a crime of passion. It's fraud, conspiracy, and possibly premeditated murder. But if we go public, we have to be certain. One wrong step, and she walks. Adam handed her a copy of the folder from the storage unit. She leaves the country in 2 days, If we wait too long, we lose her forever. Serena nodded slowly, then picked up her phone. I know someone who can run a background check on Rourke, quietly, and I can try to trace the charter flight, confirm it's registered. But I need you to promise me something. Adam looked at her, waiting. If she knows you're close to the truth, she could become desperate. Stay somewhere safe. Don't go back to your motel tonight. Don't confront her. Let's gather everything, then move together. Adam agreed. He hadn't planned to sleep anyway. They parted ways an hour later. Adam checked into another motel under a fake name and parked his car 2 blocks away. He spent the rest of the night backing up files, reviewing timelines, and piecing together a final picture. What emerged was chilling. Martin had suspected Eleanor of cheating. He hired a private investigator, who followed her and Rourke for months. When Martin confronted her, or planned to, something changed. The new insurance policy had been signed shortly after Rourke appeared in the pictures. Days later, Martin's car veered off a cliff. No skid marks, no sign of a struggle, just a faulty brake system. One no one questioned because the vehicle caught fire and destroyed much of the evidence. Rourke had gone dark after that, and Eleanor had acted quickly, arranging a payout, keeping quiet and preparing to vanish. But she hadn't expected Martin to leave behind evidence. She hadn't expected Adam to find it. The next day, Serena called. Her voice was tense. We confirmed the charter. It's scheduled. 1 passenger, no checked baggage, and the ID used is definitely fake. Adam's pulse quickened. Can we stop it? Not without law enforcement, she replied. But I've spoken to someone at the state attorney's office. If we can get a warrant to search Eleanor's home, or even hold her for questioning, it might be enough to delay her departure. I'm pushing it through now. The countdown had begun. Adam knew there was one last thing he had to do. He drove to Martin's grave. The sky was overcast, wind shaking the trees, but he needed a moment there. Just a minute to feel close to his brother, to promise he wouldn't let this go. As he stood in front of the gravestone, he noticed something strange. A fresh bouquet of flowers placed that morning. A ribbon wrapped around it bore a name he hadn't seen before. Harper and Rourke Logistics. Adam's chest tightened. Rourke had been here. Or Eleanor had. Maybe both. Watching. Waiting. He turned and walked quickly back to his car. He wasn't sure how much they knew, but it was clear now. He wasn't just investigating a crime. He was being hunted by the people who had committed it. Time was running out, and if he didn't act fast, justice would slip away again. The wind howled through the empty airstrip as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. The runway stretched into the distance like a shadow, barely visible through the thin mist rising from the fields. Adam sat in his car, parked just beyond the chain-link fence, his eyes fixed on the private hangar marked Emerald Sky. Inside, a small jet waited with its engines quiet, but ready. He checked his watch. It was 4:43 a.m. Everything was in motion now. Serena had managed to get a contact in the state attorney's office to sign off on a temporary hold order, but it came with a condition. Eleanor needed to be detained on site with enough justification to question her. Adam's evidence had helped, but the legal threshold for murder was still out of reach. They had one shot to keep her from disappearing, and it relied entirely on timing. Adam checked his phone. Serena was already at the sheriff's office, pressuring them to act. A single cruiser had been dispatched, but its arrival was cutting it close. Eleanor would be here within the next 15 minutes. If she boarded the plane before they arrived, She could claim diplomatic intentions, business travel, or a simple vacation. And once that plane left U.S. airspace, she was gone. At 4:51 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the hangar's side entrance. Adam ducked lower in his seat. He recognized her instantly. Eleanor stepped out, wearing a beige trench coat and oversized sunglasses despite the dim light. She didn't look rushed or anxious. She looked composed, as if she had rehearsed this moment 100 times. Behind her, a tall man in a dark jacket stepped out. Adam's heart raced. It was Rourke. The two spoke briefly with the pilot before Eleanor handed over a black carry-on bag. Rourke surveyed the area, his posture rigid. Adam could see it now. This wasn't just an escape. It was a farewell, a clean break. Adam knew he couldn't wait. He grabbed his evidence folder, climbed out of the car, and walked toward the gate. His footsteps were fast, but controlled. He waved as he approached, drawing attention. Rourke noticed him first. His posture changed instantly. One hand disappeared into his jacket. "Don't," Adam muttered under his breath. He stopped just beyond the gate, close enough to be seen but far enough to stay out of reach. Eleanor turned. Her face barely changed. She raised her chin slightly, her mouth tight. No shock, no panic, just a cold understanding. "You don't have to run," Adam called out. "They know. The charter's flagged. They're on their way." Eleanor didn't speak. Rourke stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. "You can't stop this," Adam continued, louder now. "The storage unit, the contract, the bank records, it's all documented. If you leave now, they'll chase you." "Still," Eleanor said. "Nothing." She walked toward him, slowly, stopping just on the other side of the fence. Her expression was unreadable. "You never really cried for him," Adam said, his voice low. "Not once." Her jaw twitched. A flicker of something passed through her eyes, irritation maybe, or regret. "I thought you loved him," Adam added. "But you were planning this before he even signed that policy." A beat passed. "Martin was in the way," she said at last, her voice calm and steady. "You don't know what it was like, living with a man who saw everything as his to control. He thought he owned me. And when I stopped playing the perfect wife, he started following me." He became paranoid. Adam stared at her. "So you killed him?" She didn't blink. "I freed myself." Behind them, red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Rourke turned sharply. He grabbed Eleanor's arm, urging her toward the plane. But she pulled back. "They'll find the photos," Adam warned. "They'll see the documents. You can't hide anymore." Rourke's hand went into his jacket again. Adam stepped back. "Don't be stupid. There are cameras, witnesses. Do you really want a shootout on a runway?" For a second, it seemed like Rourke might go for it. His fingers hovered over something in his coat. Then the sirens grew louder. The cruiser screeched into the lot. Tires. Kicking up dust. 2 deputies jumped out, weapons drawn. "Hands up, both of you. Step away from the aircraft." Rourke froze. Eleanor raised her hand slowly. Adam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The deputies moved fast. Rourke was disarmed and handcuffed. Eleanor stood still as one of the officers read her rights. She didn't struggle, didn't protest. It was like she had known this moment would come eventually. As she was escorted to the cruiser, she looked at Adam one last time. No anger, no fear, just quiet disappointment. "You should have left it alone," she said. Adam didn't reply. By sunrise, the airstrip was quiet again. The plane never left the ground. The officers collected Adam's folder as evidence. Serena arrived just after 6 a.m., her face pale from lack of sleep but alight with relief. She hugged Adam briefly before sitting with the officers to explain the timeline. Later that day, the news broke. The local station led with the headline, "Rosewood widow and alleged accomplice arrested in murder plot." Details were still unfolding, but the basics were there. Martin Caldwell's crash was no accident. A conspiracy had been uncovered, one fueled by greed and betrayal. Eleanor Caldwell was in custody, and Daniel Rourke faced multiple charges, including attempted escape, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. The insurance company froze the payout pending investigation. Martin's policy would now become central to a legal battle. But at least, Adam thought, the truth was no longer buried. He visited Martin's grave that evening, this time with no urgency. The bouquet from before was still there, but now the name meant something different. No more secrets, no more pretending. "I kept my promise," Adam whispered. "They won't get away with it." The wind rustled the trees overhead. The cemetery was still. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued that Rourke had acted alone, that the contract was a fabrication, that the photos had been staged. But the evidence was too strong. The case would likely go to trial by the end of the year. Serena's report ran in the paper for 3 consecutive days. Public opinion turned swiftly, and Adam, he moved on slowly. He never returned to the house he and Martin had shared summers in as kids. Too many memories now, too much loss. But he kept a copy of the folder, the photos, the receipts. A reminder of how close the truth had come to being buried forever. In dye. The end, Martin's final message, the envelope at the funeral, had been the spark. A single act of foresight. Without it, no one would have asked the right questions. 2 hours after Martin's funeral, his brother made a discovery that changed everything. And because of that, justice finally had its chance.